The views or opinions expressed on Ann Arbor Inclusive do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the City of Ann Arbor and the Commission on Disability Issues. For more information about the Ann Arbor Commission on Disability Issues, please visit a2gov.org/disability resources.
Hello everyone and welcome to Ann Arbor Inclusive. I'm Zach Damon. We have a wonderful show for you today as Dr. Edward Hurvitz, Professor and Chair of the University of Michigan School of Medicine and Rehabilitation at the University of Michigan Medical School, joins us in studio. Man, what a mouthful that is. But my goodness, it's great to have you. So let's get the ball rolling, shall we?
Sure.
You attended Wayne State University in Detroit for undergraduate studies, where you were awarded the Howard A. Donnelly Award as class valedictorian and graduated from Wayne State College of Medicine in 1984. But Dr. Hurvitz, I'm curious, do you remember the moment when you said, medicine is for me?
Well, I've always been interested in science, Zach, and I've always wanted to do something with people. When I was 16, I had a friend whose father was an orthopedic surgeon. And he actually used to take us on rounds and every so often let us take care of some of the patients in the emergency room.
Oh, wow.
We applied a few casts. Maybe I shouldn't talk about it publicly, but it was 40 years ago.
Sure.
And that really made me interested in medicine, and I began to explore it further from there. And that's one of the reasons I got interested in the musculoskeletal system, the muscles and the bones and so forth, and one of the reasons I got interested in physical medicine and rehabilitation as my choice of fields.
Well, I mean, I think it's wonderful what you do within the medical community. I mean, is it something now where you feel like you're always in the know? Because it's got to be constantly changing.
It is constantly changing, and I travel a lot. I go to a lot of meetings here in the country, and I actually was just in Stockholm, Sweden.
Oh, my goodness.
And I hear fascinating things, and those kind of things keep us up and teach us about the new innovations and things that are going on, so we can always try and do the most for the people we serve.
That's wonderful. I mean, how is Sweden? Did you enjoy it?
Sweden is a beautiful country. Stockholm is a city of islands, and there's just a lot of natural beauty and a lot of old European beauty around there.
Wonderful. Now, you have been involved in the diagnosis and management of children with disabilities for over 20 years, which is incredible. What in your mind has been the single biggest change you've seen over the years in working with children with disabilities?
Well, there's a couple of things that are the single biggest change.
Sure.
The one is that there seems to be a lot more we can do for people that we used to be able to do 20 years ago. There's different medications we can give and different kinds of treatments, some of them involving high technology like robotics and that kind of thing, which not only can help people to do more by, say, giving them a robot to help them in their home, but also robotic therapies. And then combined with that is the idea that we used to think that whatever happened to your brain and your nervous system, that was it. But now we know that if we do the right kinds of therapies, we can actually make some changes. I think the other big thing is that we don't always just look at how your body moves anymore. We look at who you are, your total person, and what you're going to accomplish in life as being some of the important things we focus on when we think about, in my field, people with disabilities. And that's a big change in the way we think.
You talked about medical therapy in your last response and sort of robot therapy, if you will. So can you describe that? What is robotic therapy, and how do you incorporate that?
Robotic therapy has been a very exciting innovation and intervention for some of the children we see and for some of the adults. Basically, we've learned that the way to really affect the nervous system and affect how people move and make them more mobile and make them more functional is to practice tasks over and over again. But if you practice a task and you don't do it correctly in the same way each time, it won't be as effective. So the robots guide the person to practice the task hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times and always doing it the correct way. So we have robotic systems to help people with walking, we have robotic systems to help people with reach, and then we combine that with some virtual reality technology, which makes it interesting. So even though you're walking in our gym and walking on a treadmill, you feel like you're walking through the woods or something like that. It's really quite interesting.
That is really incredible. And this is something you're doing right here in Ann Arbor.
Yes, we are.
At the Med Rehab Center.
The Med Rehab building, we have these kind of robots, and we're helping out people with the Pediatric Rehabilitation Center. We're doing these kind of things. It's very exciting.
No, I mean, yeah, it sounds like, because as you know, there are many different departments all around the country with different universities that are also working on research and people with CP. But what separates the University of Michigan from those other universities. Why come to the University of Michigan?
Well, Zach, you're from Ann Arbor, so you know what the University of Michigan is.
That's right.
We're the leaders and the best.
That's right.
So a lot of it has to do with the people. A lot of people are involved in this kind of research, but University of Michigan has some really leading people.
Sure.
People that are leading some of the efforts, people that are making some of the innovations and working with other people around the country.
Sure.
I try to do some of that, and some of my colleagues are doing that as well. That's what really makes us stand out and makes people realize what a top place we are.
That's wonderful. But going back, if I may, again, working so heavily with children with disabilities and then within the disability community and also in research for 20 years, I'm curious, and you and I talked a little bit about this before the show, but has the social climate of disability, have you noticed a change in that, and is it improving?
I think it's definitely been improving. You know, a lot of things have been improving for a lot of types of people over the past, say, 50 years or so. I've actually seen that. And certainly in disability community, we're really trying to get the message out to look at people as people, not look at them as wheelchairs or crutches and that kind of thing.
Sure.
We talked a little bit about how we see more people with disabilities in movies and television shows, commercials, your advertisements always have folks in wheelchairs and this kind of thing.
Sure.
Recognizing that people with disabilities can be consumers, can be people that consume entertainment, and people that do all kinds of things.
Right. No, that's wonderful. And I'm curious to know, I mean, because you've really dedicated yourself to the research of cerebral palsy, in your mind, what are the biggest misconceptions that you hear from people that are not in that research field and that don't really know what cerebral palsy is, you know, how it affects someone? What are the biggest misconceptions that you can present me with about cerebral palsy?
Sure. You know, there's a lot of things people think about when they hear the word cerebral palsy.
Sure.
And I think, you know, one of the biggest things people say, I've had patients say, why, my child can't have cerebral palsy, they're too bright. And of course, I think you know very well, Zach, that many people with cerebral palsy are star students and top intellectuals. People are the lawyers and doctors. I have colleagues that have cerebral palsy.
Oh, do you really?
And that sort of thing.
Wow.
The other thing is that people think that people with cerebral palsy and disabilities in general, well, that they not the kind of people that you can date and marry and so forth.
Sure.
And of course, you know, that's also very much a fiction. I have lots of patients with disabilities that date, they marry, they have children, and believe me, it's not always that they date someone like themselves. People with disabilities don't have to date people with disabilities. They're just open to anybody like the rest of us. And so I think these are some of the misconceptions, some of the barriers that we really need to fall so that people with cerebral palsy and other disabilities can move forward.
Sure. No, that's wonderful. And in your research too, and then when you deal with children, but also adults now with cerebral palsy, I know in your research and a lot of your research studies, you deal really heavily with health and fitness as well. So why is health and fitness important within the disability community?
Well, the simple answer to that, Zach, is it's important for everybody. So that's what makes it very important in the disability community. But there are additional reasons why it's important in the disability community. One of the reasons is that some of the effects of not being fit are hidden in the fact they have a disability. So people think that people with disabilities, that they age faster and they get more disabled as they get older. Well, we all get more disabled as we get older, but the thing that really pushes that disability on all of us is a lack of fitness. People with disabilities often have more troubles with fitness. One, because of the disability affects their bodies in certain ways. They're kind of technical, I don't want to go into all that right now. But also because our world is set up for people without disabilities to exercise. Sometimes it's very hard for people with disabilities to interact with normal gym equipment. People who are in the gyms, the trainers and so forth, they may shy away from people with crutches and wheelchairs and this kind of thing. Say, I don't know what to do with you. A lot of times people with disabilities don't grow up with the, people who have it as a child, for example, they don't grow up with the normal patterns of social activity that many other people have. So for example, whereas my children go out and play sports all the time, all day, especially during the summer, people with disabilities, their only activity might be physical therapy, and then they spend the rest of their time on the couch playing with video games. So the people with disability may be even further behind when it comes to fitness when they get to be adults. And then when they start having symptoms of being overtired and fatigued and just not wanting to do anything, people just say, well, what do you want? You have cerebral palsy. Your cerebral palsy is getting worse. Well, cerebral palsy doesn't get worse. And we have found that there's good evidence that says that if people with cerebral palsy, if they exercise, they get healthier, they get fitter, and they become more functional. And that's why we're really suppressing this idea of health and fitness.
Sure.
You know, they always say if exercise was a pill, it would be the biggest selling thing, because
Sure.
it makes you feel better, it makes you feel stronger.
Yeah.
Exercise even makes you smarter.
Wow.
There's good evidence
Yeah,
out there
yeah.
that exercise helps your brain grow. So we're looking at that. We're looking at the idea that if people who have difficulty, say, moving their arms, if they exercise, if they go on a treadmill, will that
Sure.
improve their arm movement because it helps their brain function?
Right.
It's very fascinating stuff like that.
No, it's wonderful, and I think that it's wonderful that you and the university are helping to promote that as well. Because as you know, I mean, it's not just a big issue within the disability community, but I would say society as a whole. You know, everyone needs to remain active. Everyone needs to worry about their health and nutrition and having energy and having stamina. So I think it's great that you guys are promoting that. I mean, have you noticed a change in that? Have there been individuals that have become more active and they've noticed an improvement?
Oh yes, definitely. You know, we work with a lot of folks on this kind of thing, and we give them advice. We correct a lot of misconceptions, like you talked about before.
Sure.
People think if they have cerebral palsy that they can't exercise, that they'll hurt themselves.
Sure.
So we talk about what kind of equipment they can use and how much they should exercise, and encourage people and say, well, even if you do a few minutes a day and build your way up.
Yeah.
So I've had people like that, and it's just made significant changes in their life. In fact, their ability to just get out of bed in the morning and do things. It's taught them that it's not because I have a disability, it's just because I let myself run down so badly. This has been a big change for a lot of people, and it's been very exciting.
No, that's wonderful. And you know, it's interesting because you talk a lot about a lot of different issues, and you know, we talk a lot about the disability cerebral palsy, but because you're the scientist, of course I know what it is, having cerebral palsy myself, but for those that don't know, what is the scientific definition of cerebral palsy? Can you?
Sure. Well, cerebral palsy is an injury or a malformation of the brain that occurs in the very earliest part of life. And our most classic definition is when you have like a premature child who has some bleeding in the brain just in the first few days of life. But it's where it's an injury to the brain, and it affects the way the person moves. And it's in the earliest part of life, and also it's something that's basically non-progressive. So for example, we're all familiar with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. We've heard about that, and those kids get weaker and weaker and weaker as time goes by. But cerebral palsy is not like that. Cerebral palsy is this injury to the brain, and then the brain stays stable. The body changes, and some of the effects of cerebral palsy cause some different effects as children are growing, and then I mentioned about the adults being less fit. But those things are things that we can work on, help, and correct through proper exercises, stretching, some physical therapy, and that kind of thing.
Wonderful. And you know, I think it's interesting too because the term, you know, cerebral is in there, so it's damage to the cerebellum, right, which is the part of the brain that deals with muscular coordination and
well, cerebellum and the cerebrum, which is the higher part of the brain. So basically damage to different parts of the brain.
Okay, wonderful. And then there's different severities, right? There's all kinds of different cases. From my case, which is spastic diplegia, meaning legs, right, tightness of the legs. And then there's other cases as well, right, that are more severe. So it's not just, there isn't just one spectrum.
Absolutely, it's a very, very varied presence. It can affect the entire body, can affect just one side of the body, the other side could be almost normal. As you say, can affect just the legs, and then a whole range of other things about, you know, unfortunately some children do have their intelligence level changed by their cerebral palsy, but as you note in your own case, Zach, it can be even above normal for intelligence, so it's a very big variance in how cerebral palsy presents.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's very interesting. I mean, it's amazing the resources and just the great things that UFM is doing in terms of innovation. And you know, it's interesting, you were talking earlier and you talked about how just generally the world is not equipped or accessible for those, not just with CP, but any type of mobility impairment. But how was it overseas? I mean, when you went to Stockholm, is that a very accessible country?
Yeah, so I've been to a lot of countries, and it really varies country by country. Stockholm actually is not too bad. Stockholm, it wasn't a very hilly area, kind of flat, and they really did a pretty good job with accessibility in terms of the buildings and so forth. Not too bad in Stockholm. There's other countries where it's more of a major problem, and I tell you the truth, it's not even always associated with the wealth of the country. There's some very wealthy countries, but you know, I mean, in America, you know, no city is much older than what, you know, 200 years, 300 years. That's an old American city, right?
Yeah.
Well, you go to some places where the city's been around for 1,000 years, and You know, some of the buildings. I know of certain places. Somebody told me they've been in other countries where they had disability programs that were 2 flights down with no elevator.
Oh,
you
you're
know?
kidding me.
You know, that kind of thing. So they were
Jeez.
very inaccessible.
Wow.
So it really varies from place to place. Sometime in the 90s in America, we had the American with Disabilities Act.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, and that really impressed on the idea that every new facility that's built should be highly accessible. And that's made a big difference in this country. That's why you see a lot more ramps and a lot more accessible bathrooms and entranceways and that
Sure.
kind of thing.
Sure.
That's been a big boon for this country.
Wonderful. Now, do you get a lot of children with disabilities that come to U of M from other countries? Do you see that, or is it not so much?
I wouldn't say a lot, but some. I've
Okay.
had patients from Jordan. We've had patients from other countries of the Middle East.
Yeah, sure.
We've had some patients from the Soviet Union area and that kind of thing. Some people come and see the kind of special things that we have going on.
Sure. And then it was interesting. I read a survey, and this is way back in the early 2000s. I think it was from 2001. But at that time, it said that there were over 250,000 cases of CP in the United States. And I read that it was also one of the most common disabilities in the United States. But I wasn't sure if that's still accurate or if it's still one of the most
Right. So
common.
cerebral palsy is the most common physical disability that starts in childhood.
Okay.
I distinguish that from, say, autism and ADHD and learning disabilities that
Sure.
are more not so physically involved, although there is some physical aspects to autism, for example.
Sure.
But in terms of the more physical disability, cerebral palsy occurs between 2 and 3 in every 1,000 births.
Wow.
And we estimate that there's, I think we came up with estimates about in the state of Michigan that there being about 600,000 people with cerebral palsy.
Right.
So it's really the most common of the physical disabilities.
Okay. Now, in terms of things that are being done in terms of innovations of, prevention, things like that, or causes, do we know the cause? Can it be prevented yet, or is it something that's always going to still be kind of looked upon as, okay, well, maybe we can in the future, but we just haven't found that answer yet?
There's multiple causes for cerebral palsy.
Sure.
But the most common cause is children that are born prematurely,
Right.
and some of the things that happen around that time of life. There's some very exciting work that's going on to help prevent cerebral palsy in premature children.
Okay.
It involves cooling the children when they're born,
Oh,
actually
wow.
bringing down their body temperatures.
Okay.
It involves giving them certain things like magnesium.
Sure.
And you won't believe this, but one of the best things we can give kids that are born prematurely is caffeine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, my
That
goodness.
seems to be very helpful in preventing brain damage when they're born early.
Huh.
Some of the statistics are showing decreased numbers of kids with cerebral palsy based on some of these new innovations. And there's some great research going on in this area as well.
Sure. And of course, I'm sure you're not, popping open a can of Coke and serving it to the infant, but
I think there's something more
a
creative
little bit,
than that,
yeah, a little bit more sophisticated.
Right,
but
that's right.
no, but I mean that is amazing. Just to know. Now, does the caffeine it probably sort of stimulates the electrons or something?
Stimulates the brain cells.
Sure.
Stimulates the brain cells, and
Wow.
that seems to protect them somewhat from some of the damage that might occur from, say, a broken blood vessel or
Yeah.
this kind of thing.
Wow.
We're not 100% sure what the mechanism is, but we're working that out. But it seems to be very effective.
Sure. And then in terms of cooling them, is it more of giving them an ice bath, if you will?
It's a
or is it-
blanket system that,
Okay.
that makes them colder, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
No, we're
amazing.
talking about 1 or 2 degrees. We're not freezing them.
No, sure, of course
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
But that is just amazing, and those are the types of innovations that are being done, again, right here in Ann Arbor, right here in Med Rehab at their facilities. That is just wonderful.
It's exciting.
Man, that's great. And then, it was really interesting, too, because, we had talked before the show, and you had talked to me about, there's a program, and it's the, forgive me, I think it's the Parents with CP
Right, right.
organization. What is that again?
Children, CP Families Together of Michigan. That's what it's
Okay,
called.
CP
Families
Together.
Together of Michigan.
Sure.
CPFTOM
Okay.
at gmail.com.
Sure.
Or you can look it up their website.
Sure.
Their Facebook is actually RFTS Michigan, and RFTS, that's all history. This is a very exciting group that is families with CP. They're very lively, very active. They interact with each other.
Sure.
They advocate. They support each other. They have events. They have fundraisings. I would advise anybody who has a member of their family with cerebral palsy or has cerebral palsy themselves to take a look for their website, for their Facebook page, RFTS Michigan, and get involved, because I think you'll find it a very, very lively, energetic group that can be very helpful.
Well, and supportive too, right? I'm sure that they have access to other resources as well.
Yes,
And
they
so
have
that-
they have a medical advisory board. I had that medical advisory board, and so we answered some of the questions. And there's a lot of trading of ideas, resources, even actual equipment. You know, as children outgrow equipment and that kind of thing.
Sure.
It's a very a good resource.
Wonderful. And then can you sort of describe to someone watching, I mean, if they're not aware of how to get involved, you know, with your department, the Med Rehab department at the Michigan Medical School, or how to, you know, gain services, how can someone become involved? How can a family become involved and work with you and some of your staff and be able to gain resources to that, so that the quality of life of their child can be a little bit better?
Sure, we'd love to see them in our clinics. I think the easiest way to get there is uofmhealth.org, which is the University of Michigan website.
Sure.
And from there, go look for physical medicine and rehabilitation, or put in cerebral palsy. My
Sure.
name and my colleagues will come up. And then they can get in touch with the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation. We can see them in our clinics. We have some great clinics at our new Pediatric Rehabilitation Center, where we have physical, occupational, speech therapy, psychology, and medicine clinics.
Wow.
It's all in one place.
Yeah.
And we can get them on the pathway to getting their sources, the resources they need, and the therapies that they need.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've worked with so many families over the years. I mean, it has to be incredible. The not just the rewarding feeling that you probably get, you know, doing something so much bigger than yourself, you know, dealing with these families, helping to improve quality of life for people with disabilities. But can you pick out one single great memory of working with some of the families, either recently or in the past, that you really cherish?
You know, Zach, I sometimes tell the students that I'm like the Wizard of Oz. You know, the Scarecrow came for a brain, and he got a diploma.
Yeah.
So one time, I had an appointment with a patient who had cerebral palsy and much more medically involved than other kids.
Sure.
And they missed the appointment, and I found out the reason they missed the appointment is they were in the ICU.
Oh, wow.
And then I got a message the mother would really like to see me because she has a lot of questions. So I went over to the ICU that day. I walked into the room, and the mother was so grateful. And she needed a prescription for a wheelchair and some advice about the child's diet and some
Sure.
advice about the spasticity medications and this kind of thing. And so I answered several questions for her. And you have to understand, her child was laying there on a ventilator with tubes everywhere. And she says, "Dr. Hurvitz, you've made me so happy. This is like the best day of my life."
Oh,
And I thought, wow, even with her child so sick, just I came in and I did these few little things for her, gave her this advice, got these loads off her, you know, now she can just deal with the child and not worry about all these other things. I told her I'd write all the prescriptions and so forth.
yeah.
What a great feeling that was, and just help me understand how we can really do to help people. It's not always a magic medicine or a magic therapy.
Sure.
Sometimes it's just being there and helping people on their pathway so that they can deal with their life and move things forward.
Wonderful. Now, you've done so much already in your career and also with research. So, Dr. Hurvitz, I mean, how do you continue to goal set for yourself? What are your goals that you have for 2017?
You know, I'll tell you, Zach, the interesting thing is, as I mentioned to you earlier, I've become interested in adults with cerebral palsy. And the reason for that is because so many of my patients have gotten older, even though I have not.
Of course.
Right.
I mean, you've always looked the
Right.
same.
So one of the most things I'm very interested in right now is taking a look to see the things we do to children, the various surgeries, injections, medications, and therapies, and all the things due to children.
Yeah.
How does that change their life when they become adults?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm involved now in some major national and international studies where we're going to be looking at adult populations, and we're going to be looking at children and then setting up mechanisms using computers and so forth to follow them along over the next past the time that I'll be here.
Okay,
But
wow.
it's something I'm planting some seeds for later on.
Wow.
So by the end of the year, I hope to get more of this set up so that we can look at a 3-year-old who gets a selective dorsal rhizotomy, a neurosurgical procedure for cerebral palsy, which you know well,
Mm-hmm.
and then look at them when they're 25 years later and say, how are they doing as an adult? And then 25 years after that,
Wow.
how are they doing as a middle-aged person?
Yeah.
And start to really give better answers to families and to physicians and to people themselves about what are the best ways, the right treatments, and the best way to go for individuals with cerebral palsy and other pediatric onset disabilities.
That is amazing. I mean, so you are really groundbreaking in a lot of ways for not only cerebral palsy research, but just medical research in general. I mean, how does it feel now? I mean, being a professor, working your way up from a student at Wayne State University, being, again, valedictorian of your class in 1984, to making that commitment, because having a medical career is a lot of work, to be successful in any career. But I mean, it's got to be a very rewarding feeling getting up every day and knowing that you're just contributing to something that's bigger than yourself.
Well, it's tremendously rewarding, Zach. But the thing that makes it rewarding is the people you work with, and to see what happens when you've helped someone and helped them to gain function and grow up to accomplish things. That's the things that really makes it rewarding, much more so than just being a professor. But I enjoy being a professor.
Oh yeah, and really quick, I mean, to those parents that have children that let's just say have just been diagnosed with a disability. They're kind of on the outskirts, and they're a little bit down and say, well, gee, I don't know if my son or daughter will be able to do this and that. What do you have to say to them about the future and why the future is bright? Why they should be positive and have a positive outlook?
I would say that the first thing is that the good news is the best thing you can do for your child is just be a good parent. You don't need any kind of magic medication or therapies. The first thing you need to do is be a good parent, and that's available and free if you do it right. The second thing is that we really are coming up with new things all the time. And when I talk about that 50-year window I was talking about before,
sure.
I'm hoping that we may even have said goodbye to cerebral palsy by then and many of these other disabilities.
Right.
Very exciting work going on the cellular level, the genetic level, all these kind of things. And I'm hoping that things will look a lot different as the years go by, and there's will be a brighter and brighter future for people with disabilities.
Wonderful. Well, on that, I want to thank Dr. Hurvitz for joining me. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
Thank you, Zach.
Well, folks, I want to thank you for joining me and hope that you enjoyed the program. And again, I want to thank Dr. Hurvitz and hope you guys can tune into Ann Arbor Inclusive next month. Stay awesome, Ann Arbor.